Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and welcome to Friday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. It's really interesting to me how I don't see any articles about the Flash movie. I don't see any articles about the Batman, Black Adam. Oh yeah, I hear them reporting of what people who are making the movie and starring in the movies are saying. But I don't see any think pieces about these movies. You know how we discuss how these, next year is a huge year for DC, not just in cinema terms, but on HBO Max as well. They don't seem to do that. Yeah, they reported on Michael Keaton's words, quoting him, but there's no opinions. As I say, there's no editorials and there's no think pieces. So we're going to do an editorial about next year. You know, the biggest year in DC live action history. This is not, actually I was going to say this is not Superman the movie, but it is, because the Flash movie has to reinvent the wheel. That's what it's doing. I mean, we've seen pictures of Ezra Miller with a couple of other guys, 30-somethings, and it may be we're even getting a Team Flash for the DCEU, which is very exciting. But next year is so huge, and we're talking about it, the fans, but the media don't seem to want to. They're still obsessed, obviously, with the haircut, restoring the Snyderverse. I understand why, but they're not really talking about next year's films in terms, as I say, with opinions. And I don't see many people doing think pieces from the media or YouTubers. And next year is so huge, and nobody seems to understand that. It's so huge, and Warner Brothers did a big thing by, doing the deal with movie theaters for a 45-day window with no streaming, because they've got their streaming shows ready. They've got Gotham PD, they've got Peacemaker. Not sure if Green Lantern will hit next year. I assume it may hit, in the fall, or as us Europeans call it, the autumn of next year. So it's very, very exciting. The Batman is a huge movie, a huge movie. It really is. We've been waiting for Matt Reeves' The Batman for such a long time. Now, a lot of people are going to be disappointed that it's not Ben Affleck's The Batman. But this is not just a brand new Batman movie. It's setting up the origins of a brand new Earth before Flashpoint as well, which is very, very interesting to me. Will we see that Batman Earth in the Flash movie? I think we'd have to. Again, that's also epic and exciting. So I am so excited for Matt Reeves' The Batman. Brand new Earth, brand new Batman, brand new interpretation of these iconic DC characters. And I can't wait to see what Matt's done. We know that Matt's been allowed to do whatever he wants. Now they did go back to do reshoots, but they're not really reshoots, they're more pickups. So, they're not reinventing the wheel. Look, there's been a lot of behind the scenes chatter that this film hasn't gone well, that Reeves and Pattinson haven't got on well. Look, it's all bullshit. Obviously we know there's an agenda, because a lot of people don't like the fact that Ben Affleck isn't getting his Batman movie as of now. Who knows what the future holds? He's back in the Flash. That's the first step. So let's not be half glass empty. Let's be half glass full here. So the Batman is going to be a big movie. It's going to hit bigger than the Suicide Squad. And look, I'll go back to the Suicide Squad and the failure in movie theatres. Listen, you've got Jungle Cruise, which is on Premier Access. And what families said was, we're not going to pay $30 to sit here at home and watch it. We're going to take the family out to the cinema to watch this movie. That's why it did big in the opening weekend, and then it held on its second and its third. But with Suicide Squad, people said, well, this is not a family movie. I'm just going to go and sit there on my own and watch this movie. It's not interconnected with the rest of the DCEU, right? I know it's got post-credit scenes, but it doesn't have any continuation. It's exciting, and I was always excited for the movie, and I loved the movie, but let me explain to you about the broader audience. The broader audience want things to connect. I've said this before. So no one was motivated to go out into movie theatres and support this movie in America because it was there for free. They pay the subscription, which is next to nothing. So they get the movie for free. Why would they go to cinemas? There was no reason to. But the Batman, people are going to want to go and see that because there's no HBO Max. And we hope that COVID will be under control a lot more by next March. So DC fandom is important to get the hype for all these movies coming out, these 4 movies coming out next year. So the Batman has got an all-star cast, one of the best writer-directors in the business, and a man who understands Batman, but looks at Batman like you look at Batman, like I look at Batman. He wants to integrate the Bat family. He wants to create a Bat universe. He wants to create a new Earth. So it's extremely exciting. And people will come. People will be excited because Matt Reeves is one of those directors that, let me say, movie aficionados will be very interested in as well, not just comic book fans. So when we brought James Gunn in to do the Suicide Squad, we thought, well, MCU fans will be interested, the broader audience would be, but there wasn't. They wasn't interested because there wasn't an appetite for another Suicide Squad film. And I've explained to you the other reasons. So that's why that's failed cinematically, but it's made its money. But now we're talking about the real deal. Forget about the placeholders of Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 84 and the Suicide Squad. They've been placeholders while Walter Hamada has been creating his multiverse strategy. I mean, look, if we go back to when Wonder Woman 84 was in production, Grace Randolph came out with that scoop that they were trying to do a flashpoint within Wonder Woman 84. I think Grace was right. As I said before, Grace Randolph is like Marmite. You either like her or hate her. But I think she was right. And I think that they had issues with Patty Jenkins. Patty Jenkins had issues with doing that. She didn't want to be involved with, you know, mapping out the universe. She's just interested in Wonder Woman. So she got her own way. Whatever they did originally, they tore it down. They went back and did it again. And that's why the movie was delayed. So I think the original plan was to do Flashpoint in Wonder Woman 84, and she said no. So she didn't want Wonder Woman being used for that, which is a shame, because we could have had it by now, which would have been interesting. But I don't think I wanted Patty involved with that anyway, so I think that the right decision was made. So they brought in their own director, Andy Muschietti, who's worked very well in the past with Walter Hamada over at New Line Cinema, as we know. So they're placeholders. But next year is the real deal. The real deal, my friends. This is where the DCEU is either a huge success or it's dead as a dodo. What's happened in the past is the past. The DCEU has got some great movies, but as a franchise, it's a non-entity, and said franchise needs fixing. Doesn't matter how much we like Snyder or this director or that movie or the other movie, it hasn't worked. The franchise is not fit for purpose. We all know that. I love the movies, but the franchise, as a franchise, is not fit for purpose. So they have to do this. So the Batman is a huge first step, and we'll see how we get on with that. It's going to be interesting. Then we go to Black Adam. Black Adam's a really, really interesting movie, and one I'm really excited about. Some of the stuff that's been teased is exceptional. So, can the director pull this off? You know, this director is someone that's worked with The Rock before, but not necessarily have the expertise and experience to do an epic comic book movie. It doesn't mean he can't do a good job. But we know the Justice Society of America in this film. We know Dr. Fate, played by Pierce Brosnan's in this film, and certain other characters. This is a character that The Rock's always wanted to play. So he's brought people around him he can trust. So for me, this is a very exciting movie, but I have no idea if it's going to be any good or not. I can just put my hand on my heart and say, look, I don't know, guys. Guys and girls and everybody else out there, however you identify, I don't know what this film is going to give us. Now that makes me nervous and excited at the same time. Now my gut feeling, not my bias, but my gut feeling says that this is going to be a very, very good film and people are going to like it. I think it has everything to succeed. And we want Shazam and Black Adam to meet in the end. And who knows? Shazam may be in a post-credit scene. Black Adam may be in a post-credit scene for Shazam Fury of the Gods, which we won't see till well after Black Adam is released. We're not seeing Fury of the Gods till 2023. So I expect Black Adam to be this cosmic, brilliant movie, interesting movie. And The Rock's not going to want it to be crap. So they really would have made an effort in this movie. I don't expect the movie to be very long. I expect this movie to be around 1 hour 50 minutes, 2 hours 15 minutes. But we've got to stop, losing our shit because a movie's a certain length. There's lots of great movies that are 1 hour and 50 minutes. I think E.T.'s around 1 hour and 50 minutes. So it's not a big deal. We know The Flash is going to be a very long film because they've nearly been in production for 5 months now. That's unheard of in modern day movie making. It doesn't happen. 3.5, maybe 4 months, just a bit. But it's well over 4 months now for the Flash movie. So we're heading to September and they still haven't finished. Which means if we go through September and they don't finish, that's interesting to me. And if they go right through to September and finish in September, that means this is a huge movie, a complicated movie, and a really long movie. Who knows how long it's going to be? I wouldn't even like to put a bet on it. So that's something we'll get to in a minute. So even though I'm a little bit nervous for Black Adam, I don't know what we're going to get. The pieces that are going to be in that movie really do excite me. And I think it's going to be I think we're going to like it. Fingers crossed. That needs to succeed as well. But again, anything that fails here still won't destroy the DCEU. The only thing that will finish the DCEU off for good is if the Flash movie fails. We'll get there. So we've had the Batman. We've seen the Batman. We've seen Black Adam. Let's just be confident and say we've liked what we've seen. Both movies made around $1 billion at the box office. Maybe the Batman made a lot more. Let's be positive. Let's say things are back to normal a little bit. A purely cinematic release window could be really good. So that's great. The DCEU is doing really well thus far. So then we have a bit of a gap because obviously Black Adam's in the summer and then it's November. And the Flash movie comes up onto the cinema screen you're watching. Warner Brothers Pictures presents to you an Andy Muschietti film. Ezra Miller in The Flash. So what kind of film are we going to see here? Well, with some of the stuff we've read and heard and the things we know some of the people who are going to be in it. But let's be absolutely clear. No one's been able to leak. No one's been able to leak Keaton in his iconic bat costume. They haven't shown us anything they don't want us to see. The other DC characters, we haven't seen them. They've only shown us what they've told us, or what we know, or what's been rumoured to be happening. So we haven't seen anything that we shouldn't have seen, I can assure you of that. I expect the beginning of this movie to maybe Barry Allen is going after Killer Frost. Now Killer Frost and Barry Allen have got a great history in the comics. Really, Killer Frost is actually Barry Allen's Catwoman, and they have a very interesting dynamic. For the life of me, I don't understand why this dynamic wasn't echoed in the Arrowverse Flash series, because she's not a very interesting character in there. She looks great, they've given her some good things to do, but it isn't what I envisioned her to be in live action. I hope we see her in the Flash movie, but who knows? So anyway, they're fighting Killer Frost, the Justice League turn up, help him, and then afterwards it's Barry Allen and Bruce Wayne in the Batcave, and Barry's upset, and Bruce asks him what's the matter, and he just says he can't live with the fact that his father's in jail. He needs to prove his father's innocence. So Bruce helps him. So they go on this little investigation. It doesn't really bring up very much, but then they have a discussion, and Barry the night before had a dream about how he broke the speed of light and stopped Steppenwolf and stopped Darkseid from coming through. I'm talking about the Snyder Cut, of course. That gives Barry Allen the idea to break the speed of light again, go back in time and save his mother's life so she stays alive and his father never ends up in prison. And surprisingly, Bruce says if I could do that, I would do it. He tells him to go for it. So he does. So he breaks the speed of light again and he saves his mother's life. and him and his dad and his mum are living together. Everything seems normal. But it's when Barry leaves the house the first morning, he realizes there's something very, very wrong. There's a meta-human war. There's a crisis beyond belief. There's US soldiers on the streets of where he lives in Central City. Everything's different. So he goes off to find, because this really, Flashpoint has always been a version like Back to the Future in a way. So he goes off to find his Doc Brown, who of course is Bruce Wayne. But when he gets to the Batcave, when he gets to Wayne Manor, it's not the Batman and Bruce Wayne he expected. Oh no, it's Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne. So it'd be very, very interesting, the dialogue between Keaton and Ezra Miller. I think it will be very, very Doc Brown, Marty McFly, and that's kind of good. It's kind of good in a way that Keaton's a little bit older and more experienced now. So it'd be interesting what kind of role Keaton plays here. I think Keaton has got a big role to play in this movie. Some people think he's got a future, some people don't. Listen, I don't know what they're going to have him doing. He seems to be very fit for his age, just because he's 69. I don't think he's your average 69-year-old. But we'll see what happens here. We want to focus on this movie. But basically, to cut a long story short, you know, this is a no-win scenario for Barry. And Barry hasn't got any powers in this new world. He's lost them. So he convinces Bruce Wayne, who thinks he's insane, to, you know, make sure somehow he's going to get struck by electricity or something like that to get his powers back. They do it a first time, and Barry is burnt to cinders. He's wrapped around with white bandages. He's burnt to a crisp. But Barry is so insane and obsessed with putting right what he put wrong, they do it again. This time it works, so he's got the speed force back, he's got his abilities, which means he heals. Because Barry's a quick healer because of his abilities. And so what happens in the end is he meets another version of the Flash. And he needs as many versions of the Flash as possible to change everything. To reboot the universe so he can recreate where he's from. Of course, when he goes back to where he's from, it's not going to be the same again. Because basically, accidentally, just like with Flashpoint, he's going to reboot the multiverse. So the players will mostly be the same. Some will change. I believe we could get a brand new Batman and a brand new Superman when he reboots the multiverse with all these versions of the Flashes. So I think, look, how this movie works out is how the audience, the consumer, the normie respond to this universe being rebooted. As I say, it's not a foregone conclusion one way or the other. It's not a foregone conclusion this film's going to bomb, and it's not a foregone conclusion it's going to succeed. It's the way they do it. It's the way they explain the multiverse. It's the way they explain the reboot of the multiverse. And we'll see. We'll see. Because by the end of the Flash movie, we're going to be in a very different universe. It's not going to be, or should I say, it's going to be very, very different. We may have a brand new Jimmy Olsen. We may actually have a proper Jimmy Olsen, a young boy. We may have a brand new actor playing Superman and Lois Lane. Who knows? It could be, well, it will be as dramatic as that. Who knows what they're going to do? Nobody really knows what they're planning here. Nobody truly knows what this movie is going to be. Because the main point of this movie is to reboot the DCEU. To reboot DC live action as a whole. That affects Arrowverse, the DCEU, Titans, everything. So it can be one big universe where they can cross over and they can kind of interconnect with each other. That's the whole point of doing this, as well as kind of moving away from what Snyder created, whether you like it or not. I like what Snyder created, and we're all trying our best to restore the Snyderverse. We'll see how that goes. But this movie is kind of, how can I say it? It's Grand Central Station. It's where everything has to work. Or there is no DCEU anymore. And they're going to have to think again. I don't know what they would do if the Flash movie failed. But there cannot be a DCEU. There can't be. How many DCEU films are being planned after Flash? It's interesting, isn't it? They haven't announced anything yet. All we've got from this point is a bunch of HBO Max shows, right? Think about it. Ta-Nehisi Coates and J.J. Abrams' Superman and Fury of the Gods. That's 2 films for 2023. It's like they're hedging their bets just in case it doesn't work. Interesting, isn't it? Very, very interesting. Now maybe we'll get more movies, another 2 movies for 2023, which there'll have to be. But we haven't heard anything yet. But don't forget, DC Fandom is coming in October. So we may hear some announcements for another 2 movies for 2023. And we may even get a slate for 2024 and beyond. We'll have to wait and see for that. But there's no question about it. This movie has to be, and it's unfair in a way, but this movie is going to have so many expectations towards it, and it's going to have to work on so many levels. And I'm still staggered that Christina Hodgson's written this and Andy Muschietti's directing this. 2 people are directing this with not much of a reputation in Hollywood. And this is the movie that has to succeed and has to change everything. They're going to have to bring their A game. We don't know if that's going to happen. All we can do is hope and pray if you want the DCEU to survive. Because I can't foresee a situation where Flash fails and Snyder is brought back to run it centrally. Because Snyder's already proven that he's not here to make films for the broader audience. He's here to make films for himself and the people who appreciate those films. So he's not the answer. You can bring him over on HBO Max to restore the Snyderverse and that's fine. He's not the answer. So I know a lot of Snyder stans are hoping for the failure of next year's movies and especially The Flash. But the failure of The Flash, I don't think, brings Snyder back to run the whole thing. It kills the DCEU. I mean, the DCEU should have just finished after Justice League, and they should have just started again. If they were smart, there would never have been a Justice League. They just would have finished. They just would have said, no more DCEU, hasn't worked, we're starting again. Joss Whedon, Jeff Johns, here's the keys to the kingdom, do what you want. And it would have been interesting to see what they would have done with a brand new universe, but they didn't do that. So the DCEU's been hobbling along from day one. Man of Steel, great movie. BVS, great movie. I think the first Suicide Squad, a good movie. Wonder Woman, one of the best CBMs ever made. Justice League, an awful movie. Zack Snyder's Justice League, a great movie. Aquaman, a great movie. But it isn't a great franchise because it doesn't connect enough. And as I say, it's a hybrid franchise now. So they really have no choice but to reboot this. But what staggers me is the people they've chosen to reboot this. So either Christina Hodgson is a lot more talented than we give her credit for, and Andy Muschietti, I mean look, Andy Muschietti's a great director. I mean, It Chapter 1 and 2 are great. Especially It Chapter 1. But we're going to have to wait and see, as I say, every day. But it is a fascinating situation. I've never seen anything like this in my life. They could have abolished the DCEU at any time because it's been problematic from day one, even though there's many films I like in this franchise. It's not a franchise. It's not the MCU. It doesn't connect. It doesn't continue. It does in places, but then it doesn't in others. So it's a maze. It's a mystery. So here we have an opportunity to reboot it and reboot it successfully. And nobody really knows if that's going to be successful. So I am fascinated by all of this because it is interesting. It is a situation that nobody knows how it's going to go, especially with COVID, especially with it, all these 4 movies having exclusive releases into the movie theatre system. So that's going to be interesting. That's an interesting experiment, like Bob Chapek says about Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings. It is an interesting experiment to see what's going to happen. People will go and watch a Batman movie. Black Adam, it'll be interesting. Be interesting to see if Black Adam makes more than Shazam. Although with The Rock in it, I think I can guarantee it will. And then obviously the Flash movie is the biggest movie ever. It's interesting. I say it's the biggest movie ever because it's kind of a glorified, it's a Flash movie, but it's also going to have dozens and dozens of DC characters. And I don't know how they're going to manage this. Nobody does. Nobody understands the element of Sasha Calle, where she's from, if she's from the new universe Barry creates, if she's from Flashpoint, or if she's from another part of the multiverse. Nobody knows. Or if she's from the DCEU Earth 1. Nobody knows. How does that work? Nobody knows. I like that, because it gets the grey matter working, doesn't it? And you think to yourself, this is very, very, very curious. So if they do pull this off, you've got to congratulate Walter Hamada. Thus far, the leadership of Walter Hamada has been a mixed bag. There's no question about that. If you look at the films in general, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 84, Joker's great, and some people say they had doubts over Joker and what, you know, but in the end, they allowed it to happen. So that was under his leadership. It was a big success. Congratulations for seeing it through. So that was a great movie. But then you've always got to look at filmmakers as well. You can't just look at the person leading the whole franchise. But what we get from Flash onwards is the true vision of Walter Hamada. These are his decisions. Now, James Gunn, directing and writing The Suicide Squad, was his decision. Is it a failure? Was it a bad idea? Is it a good movie? It's a very good movie. I still think it was the right decision, but we're just in a time frame where it's difficult, very difficult. But I'm sure they made enough money on HBO Max, more than enough, and we're never going to know how much. And that's something Access Media are just going to have to come to terms with, that they're not going to know how much films make anymore, which is difficult for them because they've turned box office reports into a very valuable thing for themselves, because people have become obsessed with box office and the reports. But at the moment, they're not important. They will be important in terms of DC live action and those 4 movies next year. Extremely important. We'll see where we go with that. But I can't see the future. I can't tell you that this is definitely going to be a success. As I say, I would have just shut down the DCEU pre-Justice League. Yeah, you know, Kevin Sugihara brought in Joss Whedon and put Jeff Johns in charge of DC in general. Let those two start from scratch and see what they could do, but they didn't do that. So now we have this hybrid franchise that's getting a reboot. Meanwhile, you've got these fans from the beginning of this franchise fighting for the restoration of this franchise. For me, it's an utter clusterfuck. It's an absolute mess. And the thing I would have done is to say, I would be honest. I'd say, listen, we're not restoring the Snyderverse. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. In fact, we're shutting off the DCEU and starting again. We don't believe it's been successful enough. Too many mistakes have been made. I would be direct. I think that's the best way. And it's not the way studios work, because they think it takes away consumer confidence. But there's no consumer confidence anyway. Do you understand me? All the consumer confidence from the movie industry right now is with the MCU, the Fast and the Furious franchise, and even probably the Mission Impossible and John Wick franchises. But not with the DCEU. As a franchise, it is not valued by many people. Very few of us are supporting it, as the box office for the Suicide Squad attests to. So, can you really reboot it? A failed franchise, can you reboot it and start again? Maybe people will say to me watching this video, well, Mick, what's the difference from starting again and just rebooting it? Well, because it's still going to be the same franchise, but they're starting again. We'll never be able to quieten the noise of Restore the Snyderverse and what might have been, unless the DCEU is so successful that their voices are drowned out. That's the only way. So this is what I'm saying to you, that the Flash movie isn't just another superhero movie. We can make excuses for Suicide Squad, we can make excuses for Wonder Woman 84 and even Birds of Prey. But when we get to the Flash movie, there will be no excuses. There will be no HBO Max. For 45 days, that movie has to do Force Awakens money. And you can comment down below and tell me I'm wrong, but these are facts. This movie has to make so much money. And critics have to love it, and the audience have to love it. Everyone has to love this film. It can't be a dud that people hate. It can't split the audience down the middle like Man of Steel did, like Batman vs Superman did, like Suicide Squad 2016 did. It can't do that. This film has to be loved by everyone. Basically, this film has to do what the first Avengers did. Because let's be absolutely clear here. The first Avengers movie saved the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because before the first Avengers, a lot of MCU fans and the broader audience weren't coming to the table and weren't celebrating the MCU or Kevin Feige. That movie saved everything because it was the first team up and it worked, and they haven't looked back since. It's as simple as that. And this is what the Flash movie has to be for the DC live action universe. They are, doing something unparalleled. They're saying, right, we're going to do this movie that not only reboots what's happened before, right, so we can start again and get away from the clusterfuck, right? We're going to make everything canon. We're going to make every live action iteration you've ever seen fucking canon. Brandon Routh's Superman, Arrowverse, Smallville, everything. Superman the movie, which is Brandon Routh's 2005 Superman. We're making everything along with the DCEU canon with every live action iteration ever done. Wow. But to do that, you have to be smart. You can't just throw it in there. It has to work. So this Flash movie will have no excuses. So once the dust settles, it's either extremely successful and everybody loves it, or some hate it, some love it. That's no good. This has to do what Joss Whedon's first Avengers movie did. It's as simple as that. And even Age of Ultron, which some people don't like, still did good money, and people still loved the MCU, and the MCU kept on going from strength to strength. Because once you've had a success like the first Avengers, no one talks against you. People criticise this movie or that movie, but at the end of the day, people still support the franchise, and the normies are excited for the franchise to go on. This is what the Flash movie is. The Flash movie is the one that makes or breaks the DCEU. And I'm fascinated. Truly, I think about this film all the time, and I think about next year's DC content in general, all the time. I'm fascinated what's going to happen here. When I saw the numbers come back for Suicide Squad before I even reacted to it publicly, I said to myself, doesn't matter. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This was never Walter Hamada's plan. It's a fucking placeholder, as I keep on saying. So I have to look at the time. I've got to go shopping in 10 minutes, and I'm gagging on. When I talk about this stuff, I can't stop. So I'll talk on for a couple more minutes. So, as I say, I'm so fascinated because I'm one of these people who likes to be in control. I'm scared when I'm on the aeroplane, especially when it takes off, because I'm not in control. And I don't know what's going to happen. And that's scary. Because ever since the DCEU started, we've been just like watching a normal franchise. It's been, well, it's not a normal franchise, is it? But Man of Steel, right, next movie BVS, next movie Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, oops, we did a Justice League film that didn't work. What's going to happen now? And, we've gone from film to film to film. And there's never been a hint about a reboot, although many, analysts were saying after Justice League they would reboot it. Now, I disagreed with that and fell out with many kind of analysts, and I got blocked by them on Twitter. But it turns out they were right. But even they didn't think that we were going to reboot it, but still remain within the DCEU format, but make it bigger and bring it together with the rest of all live action iterations ever made in the DC live action universe. Nobody ever thought that. When they were predicting reboots, they thought, They're just going to put it to bed and start again. But doing this is the most ambitious thing I've ever seen in Hollywood history. And how it turns out, I have no idea. This has been the Movies TV Mad Daily. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. I will see you in the next video. Remember, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. You'll find me somehow. Until the next video, goodbye.